Good morning, everybody. I'm Richard Brent, the Editor-in-Chief of Briefing magazine, which is the publication for all things smarter business management, as I hope some of you know. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. This morning's Briefing Frontiers event, we're considering what legal business needs to be sorting through right now to get into its strategic pack to thrive in the landscape that looms for this profession post-2020, whatever that future may bring. I'm joined here by NetDocuments, which specialises in cloud-based document, email management, and workforce collaboration management. And now Hogan Lovells, who is our guest firm this morning, our guest law firm this morning, selected NetDocuments as its document management system back in early 2018. And it said at the time that it had recognised that that was the platform for replacing its two existing document management systems with a single global platform that could deliver on current and future business requirements. That's what the press release said at the time. But who could have predicted really quite what those requirements would have become over the past 3 months? So my law firm guest this morning, as I've alluded to already, comes from Hogan Lovells. He is the CIO, Gareth Ash, formerly CIO also of Allen & Overy between 2010 and 2014, and has had some stints at some other law firms as well. How are you this morning, Gareth?
I'm very well. Yeah, good morning, Richard, and good morning, everybody else. It's good to be here. Nice sunny day out my window anyway, so hope it is the same for everyone else.
Here as well. Thank you very much for joining us. So we're talking about all sorts of things this morning, most of them sort of looking into the future, but let's start with this very recent past. I've got to ask you really, were you able to what extent were you, the firm, and your team in particular, able to be prepared for the enormous change that I think nobody could have foreseen, perhaps just 3 or 4 months ago?
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head at the end, which no one could have imagined this. Like all these types of events, they always manage to surpass any sort of expectations. So I think Hogan Lovells was in the same position as most other organisations, that no matter how prepared you were, it wasn't meant to be on this sort of scale of magnitude. But over the last several years, we've done a lot of investment into sort of mature our infrastructure and mature how we operate, especially around remote working. We're still on that journey. The buzzword now is gone to digital transformation, but we were certainly on that journey. But I think the thing that when this broke was that, oh my God, we've got remote working for snow days. All of a sudden, how do we hold up the whole of the firm from Sydney to Silicon Valley? But the investments did put us in good stead. The work my team and everyone else had done meant that give or take a few tweaks here and there, pretty much and it very much was a switch flipping overnight almost. We did exactly that and went to 6,000 people working from home, overnight. Then worked through the various the challenges of a workforce that perhaps wasn't used to working from home or working with the tech. So I'll happily carry on that thread if you like in a moment. But
yes, absolutely. Yeah. So you had the underlying requirements in place, but the title of this session is burning your rule books. But there wasn't an actual rule book that you could follow the process of this. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess you can probably categorize the challenges in 2 or 3 areas, which the first one was, with the infrastructure, take this. It's like your classic sort of putting more cars down the road, so to speak. So as I say, we had a few things to sort out, some of it around licensing and things like that, but generally the infrastructure held, and looked to make some sort of future changes to sort of make sure we could sustain that. But other than that, it's fine. The next thing was really around all the processes and training and education of the workforce. Like all of a sudden, how do I do this? How do you go home, how do I print? How do I do, how do I work on a laptop? How do I connect? How do I use a security token? Because I haven't used it for years, So just getting everyone up and running. So, the support teams and training teams are incredibly busy.
Yes.
And then, of course, the other sort of category of challenge was the supply chain. How do you do all the things that you rely on an office? So many things we do rely on an office. And that's, whether we're deploying software, whether we need to provide new equipment, whether we're bringing on new joiners, and, keeping a stockpile of the sort of peripherals and things that we need. And so in a world where obviously the supply chain itself was struggling. So, those are the three areas. But, on the whole, I'm very much pleased to say that we were able to sort of overcome most of those challenges. And I would say that the main ones now are really around doing things remotely, such as the sort of major upgrades. A lot of our projects we sort of stood down. So how do we keep progressing when we're not all in the office or relying on an office infrastructure in a long game is what we're focusing on at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. When I introduced NetDocuments, I also mentioned that they specialise in collaboration, and I guess collaboration has really come under the spotlight, as it would, with people just not being able to see each other in person as much. Has the things that you've had to do, have they changed how people collaborate? Apart from the inevitable not being able to see each other, on documents, in terms of process, things like that. Has that been a change that you've had to drive through alongside these other ones?
Yes, I think predominantly it was around the organization communicating and then collaborating and having those tools, and with our clients as well. So of course, all of a sudden you didn't have that physical interaction with clients. You're not traveling. You're not meeting in your offices. So the one of the tools, and I know it got a lot of news, but I think we rode the wave just at the right time. Is we launched Zoom. Yeah. And along with a number of these technologies, it's always very interesting to see unintended consequences of technology. So we initially pushed on Zoom, and the team did a fantastic piece of work on the due diligence, because there was a lot of stories at the time about the security, but we did quite a thorough job there, and worked a lot with Zoom to make sure we were 100% satisfied with what we were able to roll out. And so what started off as being a sort of tool to communicate with clients has become almost whether we're doing interviews for new staff, whether we're running webinars, town halls, you name it. I think even quiz nights. It's interesting how these unintended consequences of technology somehow snowball away from the original intent. We're in the process we're about halfway through an MS. So again, we had a lot of things on the cusp. So that held us in good stead, like MS Teams, Microsoft MS Teams, which of course gives you, the more sort of feature-rich collaboration, which, Zoom is more a communication tool. So, we're pretty far along on that as well. So that's held us in good stead also. So the other areas were electronic signing, with clients that took off as well. So we found all these little things where people relied on, physical touch points with the things that people wanted immediately to sort of overcome, that communication, electronic signing, collaboration tools, and the like.
Yeah. In fact, we had our first question for you from Annette Brown. She said, as English judges are being told not to use Zoom by the government, what other solution do you have in place at the moment, if you do?
Well, as I said, we do have MS Teams, and we also use Cisco WebEx as well. I think interestingly enough, Zoom got a lot of bad press just at the time that they put all their efforts into security. So the last few releases, it's become an incredibly secure product. And unfortunately, of course, with Zoom, a lot of people around the world, and there were a lot of big stories where people just jumped on the technology without understanding it. And so it does take some time. Unfortunately, we've got a team that were able to sort of do that due diligence and understand all the settings that they needed to make it much more secure. So we have a bunch of other tools as well. So we have MS Teams, we have Cisco WebEx, and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. So now, looking forward, we've seen a couple of the law firms, at least, in the news that they are cautiously, doing these phased reopenings of the new office space, whatever that might look like. And these are spaces that were, in many cases, designed. We've written about this quite a few times over the past few years. Designed to allow people, to help people, to bump into people that they didn't normally see. The complete antithesis of what social distancing is asking people to do. How are law firms going to deal with that? How is that, to what extent is that on your plate? I suppose, I guess it's on facilities as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the $64,000 question at the moment, and it's interesting if you look at the headlines from when this started to where they're getting to now, which highlights an element of human behavior, which is we have very short memories. So if you go back several weeks, no one was going to go back to the office for the next year or two, and it was all going to be very different. We're already seeing London. We haven't gone back to the office at all, but with Germany's been back for some time. Some of our American offices have now reopened. Asia, of course, has been back for some time, and there is an element of things sort of going back to sort of normal. So it's more about now how much. As things settle down, and if you like, the hype curve comes back down to a new baseline. So, I don't think we'll go back to where we were completely, because we now have a more digitally aware workforce. We can imagine things working differently. On the other hand, I don't think it's going to be where it was at the top of the hype curve of, we're all going to be at home and never go back again. But it does throw up, some interesting possibilities about what does the building of the future look like. With 50 odd offices, we've always got some new building on the horizon. We have to start thinking about that. How much floor space do we take? And we've also got this sort of slight contradiction going on as well. So if you think, traditional law firm is a load of sort of boxes for offices and the like, and the modern workplace is a bunch of sort of landing spaces and collaboration spaces and open sort of tabletops, which of course aren't necessarily brilliant for a pandemic either. So looking at what that workspace looks like to sort of, on the one hand, sort of provide the type of collaboration spaces that we need going forward, but on the other hand, sort of factor in the fact that there's no point having a huge density of population in an area. Throws up some interesting designs, and I think I mentioned it to you before. I wonder which architect's going to claim the first pandemically designed building, or anti-pandemically designed building. So we're sort of mulling on that at the moment, more about sort of looking at what opportunities are there for groups of people who may not need to be in the office so much as they used to be. How do people need to sort of work in the future? What sort of workspace does that look like, as we've got some buildings on the horizon that we'll have to make decisions on. We haven't landed anywhere quite yet, because the world is still unfolding, and our leadership, like the leadership of all firms, is trying to get its head around how does this play out? How are clients going to want to interact with us? That's the important thing in going forward. Having the sort of tech in a building, or the meeting spaces in the building to transact with clients. Or have the tools, so if they want to meet less. At the moment, it's too early to tell completely, but we're sort of trying to sort of understand that. And we have a group which I'm part of inside the firm that's sort of looking at this sort of reimagination of what that workspace and that agile workforce might look like. But can't say at the moment we've come down completely one way or another. Just we're looking at all the different implications. So.
Yeah, you've touched on this. We've got another question from the audience, though, so from the listeners, rather. So I'm going to put it to you. Steve Harnett asks, what longer-term impact would you see in client engagement as a result of remote working, and how do you see this being reflected in your office spaces? So you have sort of slightly touched on that, but perhaps just expand a little.
Yeah, so I can imagine myself giving an answer to this one and perhaps sort of looking like quite foolish in a few years' time. I don't think the flagship office locations will completely disappear. It'll be interesting to see if there's pressure from clients, for example, to sort of say, well, we can work remotely. Do you need to have them? On the other hand, I do think it will be slightly cultural and regionally different as well. So I don't think for a firm like ours, it's going to be a one size fits all, and that's across all of this, whether it's about agile working or office locations. So you can imagine, and I'm just saying imagine for the moment, that in a place like London, how we may work may be very different because, people, because of the commute and everything else, there may be much more appetite by clients, by ourselves, to sort of work much more sort of, remotely or at arm's length. However, you go into other regions and cultures where perhaps, it's a very different way of working. The concept of having the sort of flagship office locations that we have at the moment will remain, whether that's Asia, South America, areas of the US, for example. So I don't think it's going to be a one size fits all, but I think it's going to mean is law firms are going to have a sort of an arsenal of options about how they engage with clients, to have that offering. So if they want to work electronically and digitally, you can do that. But there's certainly going to continue to be that sort of traditional way of execution as well. Whether that's for a specific client or a specific jurisdiction or region, I still see that continuing. But yeah, what we're doing is looking at what we're going to need to sort of digitize some of the things that we've traditionally relied on paper and offices for, because we know that's going to be an area that we need to, we're going to be required from clients to be able to operate in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the office space and solutions. What about the sort of underlying enterprise technology? When we spoke before, you said, I think you said that that might need some exploration as well for law firms in the future. How do we make all this work?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the firms like ours have been doing the heavy lifting underneath. And NetDocuments is one of the final pieces in the jigsaw for us on that in the sort of unified document management system. And for some time, having systems that are, we have a number of cloud-based systems which of course provide that easy access, remote access, device agnostic, and obviously support sort of remote working environment. I think really our attention is now starting to sort of change more to that practice and process related technologies we need to digitize. So when you look the entire process from end to end, whether those are workflows, whether that's like robotic process, automation, whether that's interactions with collaboration tools, we're sort of making, rather than these, the big systems, which we've been doing for some years, now starting to look at that more, practice related, client related type ways of working, where, digitization perhaps hasn't been so significant over the last few years. So we I think a lot of other firms were looking at these areas as well, but certainly the what's happened with COVID-19 has made us think, yes, seeing a world where you're not relying on people touching bits of paper from the end-to-end process, whether that's financial processes or whether that's interactions with the client, is something we're looking to explore.
Mm-hmm. And obviously a lot about law firms having to change. What about your relationships with your technology partners, technology partners? Is there change you would like to see there in any respect?
Well, I think under a number of levels, I'd be interested for the people who are actually on the call to get their thoughts on this one. But certainly what we discovered is a lot of the things we do as an IT organization, we're not geared up to work off a sort of remote working environment, as I mentioned. So when you look at whether that's provisioning, laptops, or whether that's actually deploying upgrades and software. It's not easy in a remote working environment, to deploy, 10 gig, major upgrade to a new version of Office or whatever it happens to be that requires a bunch of reboots and restarts to a user who's got nobody around them. And if it goes wrong, what do you do? So for me, the big ask there is to make that much more seamless and painless, going forward, because there's lots of challenges there that we've had to overcome, and I'll be honest, we haven't overcome some of them, some of the big ones. We're still working through that. So that's one key. That's one major area. Obviously, to think about their supply chain. I mean, in fairness, they didn't, like all of us, they couldn't have seen this coming. But hopefully it'll make them think twice about the supply chain and how it works in this type of environment, because of course that was another key sort of constraint for us. Is everyone was scrambling around trying to get stuff and being able to deliver it and get it into different parts of the world. So that's probably a thornier issue, because of course it relies on many pieces in the chain, crossing borders, crossing different organizations. But certainly for us, it's sort of how do you package up a lot of what is traditionally relied on an IT department to sort of handhold and deliver, to make that much more seamless and bulletproof, because our greatest concern was deploying something and then causing a problem. So, which I'm glad to say we didn't do, but that was always in the back of my mind. Is you don't want to push something out and then it breaks, and then you've got a lawyer or partner or somebody else who can't work because the update itself has caused the issue. So that was an area that for us was I would say one of the top considerations. But it'd be interesting what others what their observations are. Yeah, I just wanted to point out, I'm sort of looking at the questions coming down the side, and I saw something I'm interested in. Annette has said, looking at a human scale arms for our desktop that has a monitor and laptop, act as a hybrid. So that's a really good one. Yes, I think a point I hadn't touched on was this whole piece about people who've got kit in the office and then they go home and they haven't necessarily got all the monitors and things that they need. So yeah, that's a good suggestion. If everyone else can see that, I assume they can. Yeah.
Yeah, they can. Thank you. Yeah. What was that? Oh yes. So security. More people working from home, obviously. Does that just intensify the security challenges, or does it sort of change them? Do you have to look at what you need in terms of security?
Well, our security is designed and implemented to try and obviously to cover the whole end to end. We had people working remotely before, so the size and scale itself wasn't necessarily a factor in saying, oh, now we've got to roll something out because we've got more people working from home. I think the main thing that we needed to be mindful of is opportunity for people to take advantage of the situation. And therefore is reinforcing the awareness messages and everything else about what people were doing and what they were interacting with, and what they could possibly access by working remotely. So you've got a situation, for example, somebody could ring up and pretend to be the service desk, because it was much more now opportunistic to sort of do something like that when there's a lot of people working from home, expecting lots of calls, getting lots of information from support and all the rest of it. So we were just mindful of that, and not just somebody social engineering the service desk contacting one of our users, but actually the other way around, somebody pretending to be a user contacting our service desk saying they needed help. So we were just very mindful of that, that when there's a crisis, there's an opportunity, even if it's for bad purposes. So we were mindful to do a review of our security measures, but it was predominantly around that awareness and reminding people, that when they're seeing emails, when they're being contacted, just to do the normal things that you would expect them to do to stay, to be aware and not take things for granted, because it was an area for opportunity.
Yeah, that's interesting. As we've heard before, in more normal times, more about the people, the behaviours than anything else when it comes to defending yourself against these threats. Another thing that's been under pressure is, of course, potentially under pressure is productivity, and lots of talk about, to what extent people need to monitor the productivity of the workforce. There's been talk of, the danger of e-presenteeism replacing presenteeism and things like that. Obviously, well-being is under the spotlight. I just wondered the balance between security and productivity as well. Is that something that needs addressing? Or is that something that you think that is okay in terms of what people can access and need to access in order to be as productive as they need to be out of the office?
On the whole, most people were able to access the things that they needed to be productive, and I think also we have to bear in mind that the situation we've been in with the pandemic is not actually what it would be like in a normal remote working environment, because everyone was working from home. Clients, partners, lawyers, IT department, PAs, everyone was working from home. So there's a sort of an element that you're all in the same boat and making things work. But we have to accept that a sort of an agile working environment going forward in a return to normal situation would not quite be the same. Whether it's well-being, productivity, and interaction. So the role of a PA when there's people in the office is very different to when everyone's remote, for example. But on the whole, because of that, everything that we provide sort of stood up to scrutiny, in the fact that most, I would say 90-95% of what people want to do, they can do remotely. It obviously becomes more interesting when you go back to normal, and some people might be in the office, some people are at home, and so you need to start looking at some of the tools you have to sort of ensure that, for example, if you did have a PA at home and the people are in the office, does that interaction work how you want it to work going forward as a process, or vice versa, if the PA is in the office and some of the lawyers are working remote. But that the agenda we've had around some of the tools we're looking at, we're again we're sort of in the midst of rolling out Office 365 and sort of getting to a world where we have a combination of applications and services on mobile devices, where we're able to utilize the sort of Office 365 environment, in combination with some of the tools like Zoom, MS Teams that we're rolling out. So when we look at those sort of broad brushstroke services you provide to the whole firm, they're all designed to facilitate that. And of course, we've got a number of sort of workflow tools like ServiceNow and Big Hand we use as well. Got to be careful. I guess I shouldn't be dropping names, should I? These also help to sort of bind processes together and allow different offices and different back office functions to work together as well. So, on the whole, the tools themselves are there for productivity. Obviously, how people are managed and how they deal with working from home, and the well-being. Again, it's been an extraordinary situation, and working from home in a normal situation, where children at school, for example, it has been a factor that we've been considering, especially with our people HR team, in making sure people take breaks, take time off, believe it or not, even though you potentially couldn't go out, to make sure they stay productive and don't just become chained to the computer.
Yes. And change to a different desk or kitchen table or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Some people have said to me that we talked about opportunity, coming out of what is a very difficult and challenging time. Some people said that this is a real opportunity for the whole process improvement piece of work. I wonder if there's any particular things that stand out to you. You've seen what's happened over the last 3 months, and how people work, whether it is productivity. I know you said generally productivity is good, but or just general efficiency, where you go, that's a sort of an opportunity to change things for the better in the new normal.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, it's still early days, but we've got a task force that are looking at all these sorts of different areas, whether, as we've mentioned, real estate, looking at things like digital transformation as well. But yes, we are, and part of that consideration is that process of how can we look for efficiencies in, touch points, for example. Where can we sort of automate things that at the moment rely on a lot of hands touching it, for example. And we'd already started with a couple of, if you like, small initiatives around robotic process automation, both for client side and for back office processes. So we see great opportunity there for sort of accelerating, process efficiencies. And of course, that means potentially, what skill sets do we require as well in terms of, if you were going to run a back office finance process, from end to end automated, what sort of skill sets do you need to sort of support that? So we've looked across these sort of different areas, and we started to think further about both in the back office and how we might work with clients around some of these tool sets. But certainly whether that's trying to sort of implement more workflow, implement more automation is an area we're certainly looking to sort of drive into further. As I said, we'd already started before this. I think the pandemic has just brought it more to our fore about how important it is to perhaps accelerate these areas in terms of being able to maximize value out of that and give, ensure we're delivering good client service.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And is this to help us to the end of the sort of technophobic lawyer? We talked about, learn to use technology more, adopt it more, be more experimental with it, I suppose. What do you think of that?
Yeah, the one thing is, first of all, I would say I've really appreciated how patient and tolerant and our entire workforce has been. Actually, they've been fantastic, and I'm not just saying that, really have been. People have become more digitally aware. They've had to survive, and things that you were trying to train and educate people for years, they've had to sort of learn overnight. The question is does it get sustained? Within 4 or 5 years, 50-60% of your entire organization is churned. So it depends. It depends if the people you're bringing on have had that experience and have got there. So I hope we don't lose it, and I don't think we will, to be honest. As I mentioned, there is a certain hype, and if we go back to some form of next normal, new normal, whatever you want to call it, there'll be a little bit of that falling away. Well, I think the fear and phobia, you're right, won't be the same. And people can see how they can exist and work. And of course, there'll be a certain group of people, who found this incredibly challenging. I'm fortunate enough to live out in the countryside, but I suspect if you were, in shared accommodation in the middle of London, you probably, prefer to be back in the office. So, we also have to remember that side of it as well. It is not the same for everybody, even in the same office. But yeah, certainly think it's done great favors, if you like, to the IT department to get a much more digitally aware workforce. And
we won't be struggling as much with that buy-in for change. That's something I've heard from people. They found that this has really galvanised the sort of the change effort in law firms. Is that something you found as well? People just willingly doing things differently, not having to have such difficult conversations.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, and definitely, certainly, seen sort of attitudes and thoughts and outlooks change. But I wouldn't also sort of completely discount the fact that for us, for a global organisation, the UK has had and London especially has had a very sort of specific experience, and I'm sure other major cities in the UK. But you've got to remember, in other parts of the world, it hasn't quite been the same. And in the US, we know, New York's in the same boat as London, but you go to other places like down in Florida and our Miami office, for example, it hasn't had the same impact. So of course, for them, going back to the office has not been such a major factor. They don't have a commute like we do. They tend to drive to the offices. Similar in other areas as well, where perhaps it hasn't been the same experience. So as I say, for us, it's about balancing the different dynamics across different jurisdictions, different functions, different practice groups, depending. And what we haven't touched on, of course, is the legal industry itself. Not just client and counsel, but I noticed somebody said about British judges may not want Zoom, but they have been used in the US. So we've had to work out how do we do a Zoom deposition or witness statement, and what does that mean? How do we set it up? How do we follow the rules and guidelines coming out of the various regulatory authorities? We saw the issue with courtrooms that rely on people being there. We're sort of riding it out at the moment, but what would happen if that went on for longer? How would we have a sort of jury trial without a jury being able to sit there, for example? So there's quite a lot of questions, if you like, beyond in just the pure sort of the actual transaction of the legal business itself, not just the sort of the client counsel interaction and relationship.
We do have a question, another one. Have you noticed a difference between on-premise and cloud solutions when it comes to them being utilized by remote workers? Is that something you've been able to sort of see any difference between?
Well, we don't necessarily sort of, we don't necessarily have a complete choice. It's not sort of we have one solution in the cloud and one solution on-prem that does the same sort of thing. So we don't sort of quite have that. I think we all know that sort of cloud lends itself to remote working. It's designed to work over sort of internet connections. It's designed to be device agnostic, so it provides some benefits there. But of course, as an organization and a provider of IT services out to the rest of the firm, I have to make sure the on-premise solutions, work just as well. So haven't really noticed a difference there, as I said, but predominantly because we don't necessarily offer a choice of products that do the same thing hosted in a different way. So apologies if that's not a great answer for that question.
That was some guy, by the way, who unfortunately can't join us again. We were going to have a sort of three-way chat now with him. That's the beauty of live events, I suppose, whether they're virtual or in person. But can you tell us a little bit about where you are with the NetDocuments project? I mentioned in my preamble that you chose it in 2018, and I think you said when we had a conversation before this that you're sort of still part way through that implementation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah, we're sort of, I don't know if you call it halfway through, but and it may seem a long time, but we had some dependency projects to deliver first. So to get the full value out of NetDocuments, we needed to, we wanted to upgrade areas of our email system and our Office applications as well to get the full functionality. So we needed to get those out the way first. But also, it's a big implementation for us. I think I don't know if we're the biggest client by seats to NetDocuments, but we'll certainly be the biggest client in geographic dispersal, if you like, or demographics. One thing we've been working very closely with Guy and the NetDocuments team is around that, getting that great experience, as I say, from Sydney to Silicon Valley. In the end, you've got the law of physics to deal with, in terms of retrieving information, retrieving documents. So we've been doing a lot of testing and proving of that performance to make sure it's absolutely spot on when we go live. But we've done a lot of work around policy governance. We did a big piece around current state analysis. So unlike a lot of other organizations that have done an upgrade, from a solution to NetDocuments or another provider, we're coming from two. So again, we got half the firm on one solution and half the firm on another solution, and now we're going to effectively, not a third, but a new one. And so that's another reason why it's been quite a journey, because you've got different ways of working across the organization based on the tool set, and we're trying to bring that together and harmonize it. And so we're doing a lot of work on the analysis and the change piece as well. So at the moment, it's not so much we got problems, we've just got an awful lot of work to do, and obviously COVID-19 hasn't particularly helped the case.
We're going to have one of Guy's colleagues join us, Lucy Cifiano. I hope I pronounced that right. I'm going to throw a couple of questions at you, though, just so I want to get them all covered, the ones that we've had submitted. How did you manage the phone system? That's quite a straightforward one, I suppose, hopefully. And so have you seen a move towards shadow IT for collaboration products that IT can't offer? It's from Annette Brown and Graham Horsham.
No, we haven't. The closest we got to it, I think, is there was a demand to have something where we could easily work with clients, and so we had to quickly evaluate the space at the time. And as I said, we rode the Zoom cloud, the Zoom wave, just at the right time. I think a lot had just gone before it, and Zoom changed their mindset. So that was the biggest thing, where I think there was a big demand to have a tool that worked in that very intuitive, easy way. And of course, from my perspective, I needed to make sure it was secure, and especially with some of the headlines coming out. So that was the main area. I think most people, if anything, it was the slight opposite to shadow IT, in that I think they were happy to sort of gravitate towards the IT department to help them, and certainly with our other business service functions as well, because they had a heck of a lot of work to do also. To get people working, whether it was printing, we also use Citrix as a remote tool, so we have that, as well as a VPN solution, which is the one that's used the most. So I think most of it was people reaching out and happy to take the support from the products we had. And where we were, electronic signature was another. So rather than perhaps people going off and doing something, it was demand that then people needed to work with clients, interact with clients, and so we needed to react quickly to provide something. Maybe if we hadn't have provided something, maybe they would have gone off and done the shadow IT point, to Graham's question. So we were able to react, I think, was the main point.
And on the phone point, is there anything that needed to change there?
Just looking for the question. Is there a phone in the future world? Is that the question?
How did you manage the phone system? So did anything need to change there, I suppose, in terms of getting everybody to have the calls that they needed? We have a bit of an offering of different solutions. So some of our products, so we do use Skype as well. And you can use that as a telephone system, and you can dial out on it. So, you can do all those things. Again, this was a learning. Amazing. People may have used it internally for many years, but didn't realize they could dial. We also have an offering. Our main desk phone is Cisco. We have a number of partners who have literally a physical phone at their home, for example. We have people who have a Cisco soft phone also on their laptop. And we gave instructions on how you could forward your phone anyway to your home phone or your mobile number. So, there's an array of different options. And I think this is what this proved, is you can't offer like everything, but you can't offer one thing either. So I think, when it came to collaboration and communication, I was keen to have 2 or 3 things that we can do. And it's the same with communication. You can make a telephone call, in many ways. So as I say, we've got physical phones, we've got soft phones of the physical phones. You can dial out from some of our collaboration tools, and the good old fashioned just divert it to your mobile device was the other option as well. Perfect timing, because I think we've got Lucy waiting to join us. Let's have a chat about one other thing while she's joining us. One thing on my mind is innovation work. We talked about client service, but do you think that any of the innovation work that firms have done recently over the last couple of years will need to be reprioritized before?
Is that aimed at me?
Yeah, sorry, Gareth.
I think
continue, or is that something that's no longer as pressing a priority? The sort of finding new innovative ways of doing things.
Well, I think it's actually perhaps a change of innovation mindset. I think is probably more relevant. It's not that innovation goes away; quite the opposite. Everyone's had to be very innovative in this last few months. Governments as well. So, not just law firms. So, in some areas we've had to pivot the service model, overnight to deliver services through this period. So I think it's about the mindset of innovation changing to the circumstances. So, if in the past, there was innovation going off to the side that was more just experimentation, does this work, doesn't this work? I think it's become much more targeted around the situation, the crisis, and the opportunity. You need to stress the opportunities that are there, and that's the piece that is going to be the longer legacy out of all of this. I mentioned, humans have short memories. The question is, who and what is going to innovate out of this to do something different, or want to do something different, of course, and react to the client needs and service the clients as they want to be. So I think it's more about the innovation mindset is certainly front and center, but now sort of pivoting around the current situation in terms of coming up with new ways of doing things. Going back to my sort of, I was talking about the tech and the options on the table around, but there's options and way clients are going to want to be serviced. As I said, there's going to be a client who's going to want to come into the office just like they always have done, have the same sort of relationship, same sort of experience. And there's going to be another client who's going to say, well, I basically don't want to see you. I want to do everything electronically. We don't need to see each other. And so, Hogan Lovells and other law firms are going to have to deal with that. And have that choice is probably more to the point.
Even more power to the client. Yeah. We've got Lucy. Hello, Lucy. Thank you for joining us.
Hi there. Great to see you and to be able to listen in on this. There's been some really, really good topics coming up. I think particularly as Gareth's been talking about innovation and what this has brought out for us, because we know that working from home, particularly with dispersed offices, as Gareth has alluded to, about talking about from Sydney to Silicon Valley, that everybody needs to be operational, everyone needs to be up and running. Certainly working from home has its elements of risk saturation and being scattered security that we need to look out for globally, or whether we're even in an organisation with a few offices across the UK, that email now is becoming that default centre of where you work now. We certainly found at NetDocuments that within the first couple of days of our customers working from home, that they were able to work in an as office environment. 98% of them, I think, were up and running within 24 hours, 100% of them within a couple of days, and coming back to us and saying this is as normal environment as we are in the office. So it's obviously the technology that underpins that, as well as us all being able to adapt now to a new mindset, which I know that obviously Gareth has been extolling the values of. It's been really, really great to listen into.
I put that same question that I put to Gareth, to you, Lucy, which is, have you seen a particular area of the process, of legal process, of document process, where you see that that's a real opportunity for law firms to do things differently, in 3 months, 6 months time, because of what they've been going through here?
Yeah, I think to Lucy's point, of course, we haven't implemented NetDocuments yet, so I'm not going to pretend we have all those benefits, otherwise we wouldn't be on this journey in the first place. So very much we've got plenty for us opportunity to make that a much slicker experience, electronic experience than it is at the moment. it's a huge subject we've been talking about today, and haven't even touched on all the things where, you know, you rely on your big heavy printers in the background to do stuff, you know, but in your back office functions and things like that, to sort of package up various bundles and things like that and get them out the door. Yeah, very much that whole sort of life cycle, matter management life cycle. You know, the reason we're going to NetDocuments is to sort of have that all in one place where we can sort of manage the process end to end, you know, not have to sort of go in and out of different systems, you know, as we do today, which, as I said, which is why we're moving in the first place. So I see plenty of opportunity there, and you know, people listening may have already got to that journey and have a story to tell there, but that's certainly where we want to be. As I say, we've got an organization that's using 2 systems at the moment, you know, obviously fairly old now. So, you know, bringing that all together and having also the client interaction, that's the other thing, you know, which NetDocuments will bring us, is that ability to collaborate, you know, directly on matters with clients, you know, without, again, having to go out of the system effectively. We have ways to work around that at the moment, but we want to make it a more seamless experience, one platform to sort of do that entire sort of transactional piece within one system.
Got a great question just to close this off, to round us off. Just take back to the people, from the technology back to the people again. What have your challenges been as a leader yourself whilst working virtually, keeping in touch with your teams and things like that? Have you had to adapt the, I suppose, your leadership strategy, your individual leadership strategy as a result?
Yes, that's a fantastic question, and I think any leader always has to adapt their style to different situations, and this has definitely been a different situation. I should first of all, and again, you know, thank my own firm and the people team, the HR team, because the safety and well-being of the workforce has been at the forefront of the entire firm. I hope it's been the same for the organizations of people dialing in. And so an awful lot has been put in place, support mechanisms and tools and things that we can offer and services we can offer people as well. But, you know, from my perspective, it's about making sure my team and my managers and their teams, you know, the main thing is it's very easy remote to forget to talk to somebody. And sort of, you know, weeks can just go by and you think, well, if your circumstance is okay, you know, I'm lucky enough to live in the Chiltern Hills. But as I said, you know, you're going to have people who are sharing a property or got like small children running around. So to me, it was about you know, staying in constant contact. That was the main thing. Also making sure that you know, you're sort of actually getting, you know, time to sort of just have a chat, and it's not just all work related. You know, so we certainly did it in my team, and my teams did it, you know, just have a sort of meeting, you know, a sort of virtual drink and all those sorts of things. And some teams have had quiz nights. We also, for the first time ever, because we tended to do something different on different time zones, we just had a staying connected worldwide Zoom call and had the whole of the IT department for the first time, and just got other people talking and about their experiences. So for me, it was more about just making sure you stayed connected, and we communicated often, just see how people are, tell them to take time out. It's very easy just to sort of stay sort of stuck to your desk, and just, you know, again, all forms of leadership, the first priority is sincerity, and to have that sincerity, integrity to sort of you know, make sure that people understand that you know, it's their well-being that comes first. And always sort of wanted to remind my managers to keep checking in on their people, you know, because there is the whole cascade effect is the important piece. And I'm pleased to say, yeah, the team themselves have done pretty well.
You just reminded me, talking about that I did an interview with your COO.
Darren.
With Darren when this was all happening, so about the whole move home to home working. And I think it was this that got Hogan Lovells onto Instagram actually as well, because he was sharing, had a sort of recipe or photo competition or something, and it's the first time the firm had used Instagram, I think, in its sort of tool set as well. Is that right?
Yeah, well, and also, we've had, for those who do cycling and sports, we've had a Strava club and all sorts of things worldwide. So a lot of things going on that the firm itself provides, which is great, and making sure those are available to the staff, but to our people. But from a leader's perspective, as I said, it's about staying connected and just sort of perhaps bringing a bit more of a human touch to it, which is a bit odd in a global organization because you're often working remote anyway. But I think it's the pressure people are under in their own home environment is different, and it's those stresses that are going on. As I say, I'm in a fortunate position, but I appreciate that a lot of people have got a heck of a lot of stress with trying to balance childcare and work and all sorts of things going on. And so it's important to make sure that they recognise they could have a release valve. So.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think that's a good place to draw a close. So thank you very much indeed for that, Gareth. Really interesting. And to you, Lucy, and the NetDocuments team, and to Gareth who couldn't join us. And thank you all for listening to us too. I hope you found that very interesting. And join us again next time for whatever topic we are covering.